Sanjay Baru's book, The Accidental Prime Minister, is subtitled The Making and Unmaking of Manmohan Singh and seemed an apt subject when it first came out in April 2014, as Manmohan Singh was, after all, the sitting Prime Minister. At the time, there were stories of the BJP having translated passages of Baru's book into Hindi and printed lakhs of copies for distribution. Certainly, BJP leaders cited the book and its contents in their political campaign against the Congress, while the PMO and Congress leaders denounced the book as propaganda. 5 years later, the book is back, just in time for the 2019 election, and the BJP has once again embraced the film version of it and its narrative to run down the Congress. Joining us today to discuss the film is none other than the author of the book, Dr. Sanjaya Baru. This will be his only interview on the film, and we, of course, will speak to him about his sense of what the movie portrays and how accurately or inaccurately the film is a representation of his book. We are very grateful, Dr. Baru, that you have agreed to give this only interview to The Wire.
Well, I've known you for what now, 15, 20 years? A long time. We are former colleagues, so happy to be here.
Well, great. Now, the film, Dr. Baru, has been widely criticized for being a crude work of propaganda. And I just want to read an excerpt from one of India's foremost film critics, Shubhra Gupta of the Indian Express, when she writes, "The Accidental Prime Minister is an out-and-out propaganda film created for the specific purpose of making the former Prime Minister look like a weak, spineless man, a puppet whose strings were controlled by the family," quote unquote. As the author of the book, how do you respond to this kind of criticism?
You know, film critics are a unique species. I remember reading, I don't know if it was Graham Greene or some other author, who said that film critics are people who don't make films. So I never really read film critics. I don't decide to see a film based on what critics say. And I think generally filmmakers and artists, for that matter, regard critics as people who don't do the art but take a view on the art. So I don't want to get into a discussion on what critics have been saying, right, because there have been positive and negative criticism. As a film itself, it goes beyond the book. I think there's a lot in the film which is not there in the book. And the producers of the film have made it very clear that the film is based on the book. They call it fictionalized dramatization of the book.
I read the clarification note very carefully at the start of the film. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And so it says it's based on the book. So therefore, there's a lot in the film which is not there in the book. To the extent that there are some things in the film which are there in the book, you can take two views on how it is portrayed. I don't think, with the exception of Ian Fleming, any author I know whose book has been made into a film has ever been happy with the film version. Because the way in which the visual dramatization of a book is done. But more importantly, Siddharth, my book is written at several levels. Unfortunately, it got typecast as a kind of a critique of the Prime Minister, but it was more than that. It was in many ways a critique of a kind of government that the UPA proved to be. And also it was a look at the way in which the system functions. So I think those nuances don't come through the film, and one can't blame.
Right. But do you regard the film as some kind of political propaganda, and the fact that the BJP tweeted the trailer from its official handle, does that bother you as a writer, that this is that what you intended as shall I say, scholarly or a detached view of what happened has become something else in the hands of a political party?
Yes, I was disappointed about this from day one, but I would put the blame on the Prime Minister's office in April 2014. They, in fact, virtually handed the book over to the opposition by condemning it. The moment the book got condemned, it generated interest, it generated curiosity. So, in a sense, I think the controversy around the book was unfortunate, because as I've said again and again, and and I said this even to Dr. Manmohan Singh before the book was published, that 80% of the book, in fact, is a strong defense of his prime ministership. Only 20% is a critique. And I, in a recent afterword to a new edition, I've mentioned what Mao Zedong had said famously,
Yes.
that, nobody is perfect. If you're 70% okay, you're okay. If you're 70% good, you're good. There is always a 30% which is not good. And by that criterion, I think Manmohan Singh was a good prime minister. But unfortunately, the focus on the 30%, which is his inability to deal with corruption, which was not a secret, which was what was responsible for the defeat of the Congress in 2014, his inability to deal with corruption and his inability to deal with constant interference from the National Advisory Council and, elements outside of government, was my criticism. That here was a prime minister, unlike any other before him, who was dealing with interference in his normal functioning. And I think that became the focus of the opposition's attack. So you can use the word propaganda. I think it was something that came out of the defensive response. And in fact, many congressmen have since said to me that their initial response was actually misplaced.
But I want to focus on the movie a little bit more, Sanjay, because the formula of 70-30 or 80-20, which I think, having read the book back then, I would say is an accurate characterization of the book. It's by and large an account of what happened in the PMO, what happened in the UPA 1. The movie's focus seems to be elsewhere. If we were to use mathematical ratios, far from 80-20 or 70-30, it's more like 90-10.
Well,
90 bad, 10 good. And even the good is more as a way of scoring a propaganda point against Rahul Gandhi and Sonia Gandhi, the way that it appears in the film.
Yeah. No, there is, in the first half, considerable sections from the book. But I think in the second half, you're right. There's much more of stuff there which is not there in the book. So the balance between the first half, second half are very, very different in the film.
Right. But you don't want to get drawn into whether it's an act, whether the film is a piece of political propaganda.
If you ask that question as a journalist, as a scholar, everything is propaganda.
Okay.
What is not? Particularly anything that is political is propagating a viewpoint. We use the word propaganda in a pejorative sense, but propaganda is the propagation of a viewpoint.
Okay.
The book had a viewpoint. The film has a viewpoint. And I think the point I would like to make is that there are viewpoints in the film which are not there in the book. To that extent.
Such as? Tell us a few.
Well, a lot of the conversations for example, between Dr. Manmohan Singh and Sonia Gandhi are not there in the book.
Right.
Or even references to Rahul Gandhi. I don't think Rahul Gandhi actually figures in my book at all. Right. Except the incident where he tears the ordinance.
So that scene in the film where Rahul Gandhi barges in with a delegation of youth is an entirely...
That is there in the book,
right.
Sorry. Actually, it was not a delegation of youth, it was a delegation of Congress General Secretaries. That incident was there, sorry. There are two incidents involving Rahul Gandhi. One is where on Dr. Manmohan Singh's birthday, all the general secretaries of the Congress party, not a youth delegation, I think the film talks of a youth delegation, not correct. All the general secretaries called on the Prime Minister and Rahul Gandhi submitted a memorandum asking the Prime Minister to make NREGA universal across the country, forgetting the fact that the Prime Minister had already announced it. And that incident is there in the book, and I was pulled up for confirming to the media that in fact the Prime Minister had said this in the Independence Day speech. And the second incident was the ordnance, the tearing of the ordnance.
Right. So, the various scenes in the book, for example, the meeting between Sonia Gandhi and Manmohan Singh after Sharm el-Sheikh, clearly something that's fictionalized by the...
they're not there.
Right, exactly. Turning from the contents of the film narrowly to the question of timing, tell us your view about the timing of the film, because again, if I were to quote Shubhra Gupta as one of many critics, she says, Singh may well have been an accidental prime minister, in Baru's succinct words, and history may or may not judge him differently. But it is no accident that the film is out now. The release is completely intentional. The polls are around the corner. What do you think about the timing of the film's release? How does the film manage to appear not 1 year or 2 years or 3 years after the book, but exactly 5 years after the book and on the eve of the elections?
4 years,
Yeah,
4.5.
4.5 years, yeah.
But I think their argument is that this is when the interest is high. I mean, it's a commercial decision. As you remember, you will recollect about the book as well, when Chiki Sarkar, as the publisher of...
That's right. They were very keen that it come out.
They were very keen that it should come out before the election.
Right.
While I was saying the book should come out after the election. And the publisher's view was that this has to be a commercial decision. We have to decide when the book will sell. And I finally left that decision to the publisher. Similarly, I think Anupam Kher has said somewhere that this is a commercial decision. This is the season of politics. There's a lot of interest in politics. This is when you release a political film. When else would do? So, it's their defense. I don't have a view on that.
When did you settle the film rights for this?
I think it was about 6 months after the book was published. So somewhere towards the end of 2014 or early 2015, probably early 2015. Actually, the interesting story is that the producer, Sunil Bora, called me one day and said, I would like to meet you. And we met. And he said to me that he was with Amir Khan. And he used to regularly go to Amir Khan for ideas, looking for scripts for films as a producer. And that he had gone to Amir Khan saying, do you have any idea for a film? And he found Amir Khan was reading The Accidental Prime Minister. And according to Mr. Bora, Amir Khan said to him, this book will make a good film. And he had not heard about the book till then. So he went home and asked one of his friends to read through the book. And, and he said, I took Amir Khan's view very seriously because he's a serious filmmaker. And couple of weeks after that, he called me and said, look, we've read through the book. We think it will be interesting. Are you willing to give us the film rights? So I said, okay, this is the first time in my life somebody was asking for film rights for a book. So I signed the film rights. And then I'd forgotten all about it. I think it's taken about 4 years after that.
And did you play any role in developing the script?
Not at all. After I signed the film rights, I've had no role at all, except that I met the director on 2 occasions. I think somewhere in an interview, the director said he met me for over a week, 5 hours a day. That was not true. I think he met me for a couple of days, and mainly to understand from me some of the characters in the book, because I don't develop these characters, whether it's J.N. Dikshit or T.K. Nair. So he wanted to know a little more about the characters in the book. That was the only conversation I had. Right. Apart from that, my involvement has been...
So when you signed away the film rights, this was pretty much giving them a carte blanche to develop the book or to use the title in any way that they would want?
That's right. The contract said that the film, whatever the film version, would be based on the book, right. But not necessarily 100%.
Right. As somebody who worked with Dr. Manmohan Singh, and as someone who has, by your own account, written what you believe to be a sympathetic account of his, sympathetic portrayal of his term as Prime Minister, how did you relate to Anupam Kher's portrayal of the Prime Minister, of Dr. Manmohan Singh in the movie? And I mean the tonality of his voice, his gait. People have been very critical about the fact that these are all exaggerated in Anupam Kher, who's otherwise a very good actor, but he, in a way, plays up the character in a certain way, which seems to be far from complimentary to Manmohan Singh.
The Manmohan Singh of the film is the Manmohan Singh of today, much older, and then his speech is slower, his gait is slower. The Manmohan Singh of my book was of UPA 1. As you know, my book was about UPA 1, largely. Right. And if you see the book, there are many sections in the book where I talk about the way he walked even after his operation. Yeah. In June 2009, when he called me back from Singapore, and we walked together from 3 RCR to 7 RCR in the heat of June. I mentioned the fact that he was walking briskly. He was always a very brisk walker. He was agile. He could be short-tempered. I got scolded many times. So the Manmohan Singh of UPA 1 is very different. But I think the Manmohan Singh that Anupam Kher portrays is the Manmohan Singh that we see today. An older, slower man with a softer voice. And I think they may have taken a cinematic decision that this is the Manmohan Singh that today's audience relates to.
But even though he's hardly visible today, I mean, it's not as if anybody ever sees Manmohan Singh the way he used to.
Far more visible in the last few months.
True, but I mean, not so much. You don't see, moving images of him walking, for example.
True, you're right. As I said, the Manmohan Singh of UPA 1 was a very, far more physically active. He would walk faster than most people around him.
Do you think to that extent the film director and the actor have been unfair to Manmohan and have
Yes.
taken a decision which is a rather crude way of running somebody down, actually?
I don't like strong words like crude or propaganda. It's a way of portraying him which is different from what, as I recollect, he was in UPA 1.
Right. Sanjay, again, coming back to the broad content of the film versus the content of the book. As I said earlier, my sense of the book was that, from your vantage point, it was a portrayal of the Prime Minister as he was in UPA 1, and your sense of how various decisions and policy matters got taken. One could quibble about, and people have been critical about whether you may have exaggerated your own role or your own proximity or your own vantage point, but it was a narration of UPA 1 in the broadest possible sense. And my recollection of the book is that other than one or two incidents, I recall one incident involving Pulak Chatterjee and where you talk about the possibility of files going in a way that was not proper between the PMO and Sonia Gandhi, and the other, of course, of Narasimha Rao's funeral. But in the main, my takeaway from the book when I read it was not that this is an expose of government by remote control, but an account of the way UPA 1 functioned, in which this was one element, but certainly there wasn't that much of corroborative stuff. The film is almost exclusively centered around this idea of Manmohan Singh being a puppet, and frame after frame, scene after scene, story after story, or subplot within the film is entirely revolving around that. Even on the issue of the nuclear deal or Sharm el Sheikh, what you name it. I mean, from UPA 1 and UPA 2, they've picked issues purely to portray Manmohan Singh as a puppet being manipulated by Sonia and Rahul. Do you feel that people who see only the film are going to come away with a very, very warped notion of what your book contains?
Yes, well, I've been telling people that they should read the book. I'm responsible for the book. I'm not responsible for the film. It is true that Manmohan Singh of UPA 1 was very different from Manmohan Singh of UPA 2, which is what I suggest in the book. But on your first observation about what the book is, I begin by quoting Sharda Prasad, who talks about the Rashomon Effect. Right? Rashomon was a Japanese movie in which there are three different people narrating a same incident in three different ways. And that is always the problem when you write a book from your point of view. Now, this accusation that I exaggerate my role is a silly accusation. Actually, it's quite a stupid accusation, because I do say that this is the way I looked at things. That doesn't mean I was the most important character in the Prime Minister's office. I was the most important character in my book, because it was my book. It was the way I looked at what was happening. Whether it was a nuclear deal, whether it was other incidents, these were all first-person accounts. And there is not a single lie in the book. I mean, I think M.K. Narayanan somewhere said the book is full of lies. There is not a single lie, because these are conversations or incidents where I was the witness, and therefore, these are facts. Now, of course, these are facts that I was privy to, but therefore it was my version, and others are free to come out with their version. I'm sure there could be a different way in which, say, someone like Mr. Narayanan would have viewed this period, or someone else in the Prime Minister's office or elsewhere would have viewed this period. And I'm quite willing to accept that there are different ways of looking at the same reality, and I say that in the beginning of the book. As far as the film is concerned, clearly the filmmakers chose to pick out certain elements in the book. Now, it is not true that the Bullock's role or the other incident which were the only ones. Were the only ones. The fact is that, you know, even on the nuclear deal, and you have covered the nuclear deal more than anybody else in this country, there was constant, back and forth between the government and the party. The Hindustan Times summit which was shown in the film, was a reality. That on the same day you had Mrs. Gandhi taking a view which was different from the view of the Prime Minister. And so we went through a period in which there were differences. And finally Dr. Manmohan Singh had to put his foot down. And I think that...
No, but I'm saying, Sanjay, the very fact that, just to stick to that Veer Sanghvi incident, right? Manmohan Singh and Sonia taking different views on the nuclear deal. The very fact that Sonia can say from a public forum that preserving the government is more important than the nuclear deal, right? And then Manmohan Singh essentially goes ahead and puts the government's neck on the chopping block. Paints a very different picture from what emerges from the film, certainly, but even from the book, right?
No, I mentioned even in the film, that particular incident is shown in which he asserts himself.
Right.
After all, he says that, am I going to sacrifice the interest of the country? The nuclear deal was a high point of the Manmohan Singh Prime Ministership. And in many ways, it showed his assertive personality, which is there in the book. This was really what made Singh is king, right? There were many other issues on which he was on the back foot. But this was one thing which I don't think the film has been unfair to the book on the nuclear deal. There were other situations which, as you said, get kind of played up more in the film than in the book. But I think on the nuclear deal, there was a lot of back and forth. And finally, it's Manmohan Singh who took the decision that he would allow the left to go.
But we also know from WikiLeaks, Sanjaya, that it was the party and its dirty tricks that finally ensured that the vote of confidence in the Lok Sabha went the Congress's way.
It's not true. Look, don't believe WikiLeaks. Don't believe this. I don't believe the dirty tricks story. Okay. The fact, very simply, as I've written in the book, is that the Samajwadi Party chose to support Dr. Manmohan Singh. Why they chose to support is something you should ask Mr. Mulayam Singh Yadav.
Right.
What made them choose support Dr. Manmohan Singh? It was a political decision. And I have taken the view in the book that the vote of confidence in July 2008 was an honorable vote of confidence. This drama that the BJP had of money, of cash being exchanged, etc., was a fraud. I don't believe that money played a role. Maybe there were one or two members of parliament who were demanding some payment. I have no idea. Right. But the decisive vote for Dr. Manmohan Singh in July 2008 was as a result of a political decision by Mulayam Singh Yadav and the Samajwadi Party to come in and prop up the UPA government.
Right.
So I don't think this dirty tricks argument is a valid argument.
Okay. Sanjay, you say that the allegation or the accusation that you have exaggerated your role in the narration is foolish because you're telling the story from your point of view. But is there a danger when narrating the story the way that you've done that viewers get an exaggerated sense of the importance of a media advisor? No matter how close personally you may be to Manmohan Singh, it's hard to imagine that on crucial issues like the nuclear deal or on various other things, that you would have been the principal or the most important sounding board. Presumably there were other officials who were...
No, look, there are 2 points. Yeah. One is, I do not exaggerate my role at all. In the book, in the film, they chose to make my character the central character. Right. He's a narrator.
A person who looms large in the book looms even larger in the movie, in the form of Akshay Khanna.
See, the point about the book is that I mentioned incidents in which I was involved.
Right.
those who say I exaggerated my role don't understand what happened because they were not there. I mean, when Manmohan Singh calls me when I'm having dinner in Andhra Bhavan to say the deal is in jeopardy, is there any way you can help? And then I'm then going across to Ashley Tellis, who then conveys a message to Condi Rice. That's a fact. Now, whether that played a critical role or not, I don't know. But I mentioned the fact. Now, you could say that that was irrelevant to the overall scheme of things.
Right.
Maybe so. But then those who are aware of the other side should write their own book. Here is an incident in which I was involved. The incident about my carrying a message from Amar Singh to Manmohan Singh is a fact. I got the phone call saying that Amar Singh and the Samajwadi Party were willing to step in and support the Dr. Singh. I conveyed that message to Dr. Singh. Now, it's not that I'm exaggerating the role of... Secondly, and that is where I think some of the commentary, particularly in the recent weeks after the film has come out, is completely ill-informed. When you say someone has written, a media advisor doesn't play this role. In fact, senior journalists, senior editors have said, this is not the way media advisors function. Now, maybe so. But the fact is that I was conveying messages for the Prime Minister. I was conveying messages between Prime Minister and cabinet ministers. That's a fact. Now, I can't help it if I was being asked to do things which media advisors are not supposed to do.
Right.
It's possible that you say, oh, this is not the job of media. And I think part of the problem within the PMO was precisely this. Why should I have been called to convey a message to Ashley Tellis?
Right.
That was the job of the foreign secretary or national security advisor. But I was called. Now you can't blame me for mentioning that fact. There are several other incidents like this which I don't write in the book, which are not there. But the fact is that for whatever reason, I had become in some ways a messenger boy on many occasions.
Right. The other allegation, of course, is of kissing and telling and the propriety of that. What is your advice at a time when you have, a lot of younger people looking to get into different government and lateral entry and so on? What is your, or even you have serving bureaucrats and others who, there is in some sense a small but growing literature of people who retire and then write. What's your sense of the ethics of post-retirement writing when you hold a position of some privilege like you had?
First of all, this was the government that legislated the Right to Information Act.
Right. Thanks to the NAC, which you run down.
I know, I run down. Yeah. But the point I'm making is, it is precisely those who enacted the Right to Information Act that should recognize the importance of such books.
Right.
The problem in India, because this is not a question that is often raised in the Western democratic world. The problem in India is that we are a feudal society. Every person in power, irrespective of political party, and I've been in Delhi now for close to 30 years as a journalist, as an analyst. I've not come across a single person in power who does not expect servility from his subordinates. We are essentially a feudal society. If you say nice things, if I had written a purely hagiographical book, saying what a great guy Dr. Manmohan Singh was, nobody would have said anything. But the moment you bring in some criticism, immediately they say, oh, this kiss and tell. Kiss and tell is a pejorative that discourages writing in a free society. Why should it be seen in that manner? You should see it as a recording of history by someone inside. And it will be, I think, a terrible tragedy if as a result of such books, people are discouraged from writing. Because what we need is more such storytelling, more such recording of facts, as long as they obey two things. One, no breach of an Official Secrets Act. And I've said this book does not breach an Official Secrets Act. Second, wherever I was asked to keep a confidence, I've kept it. And I've said that in my introduction, that wherever, for example, Dr. Manmohan Singh would say, look, keep this to yourself, I've kept it to myself. There isn't a single incident or statement in that book where I was not asked not to talk about it. What the book contains, and I think Karan Thapar made this point in defending his quoting, Pawan Verma, and when his book came out, that when somebody says something to a journalist, and a lot of the things that were said to me were when I was no longer in government. I was editor of Business Standard. People forget that. I left government in 2009. And so a lot of the conversations after 2009 are conversations between a journalist and someone in government, where this person in government doesn't say, keep this to yourself. Right. It's off the record. No. And therefore, I took it that I was free to quote this. And I think people should be encouraged to write such books. I would encourage people, whether it's government officials or politicians, to write honest books. I had recently a very nice conversation with Mr. Pranab Mukherjee, who's writing the 4th volume of his book. And I said to him, sir, it's great that you are writing these books. And we hope, you'll be more forthright in the next volume compared to your earlier volumes. But I wish Dr. Manmohan Singh writes his biography, in autobiography.
Does it worry you, given the kind of reception that your book received from, of course, the establishment then, but I dare say even the establishment now, having made full use in any way that they could of the book and now the movie, would be quite wary of people in government spilling the beans, as it were. Are you worried that this government or future governments will be even more reluctant to trust non-bureaucrats and non-politicians in sensitive positions for fear that eventually they may write what they see?
They may be. In fact, one senior editor who's close to the BJP said to me that, because of your book, I didn't get a job in the government. But don't forget that Vinod Rai was an IAS officer. P.C. Parekh was an IAS officer. It doesn't require only journalists to be writing honest books when they come out. Right. You could be an honest bureaucrat who comes out and says, I'm going to write my view or my account of what happened. Right. And we are a democracy. Writing a book that is published and that is then subject to public scrutiny is not a crime. It is there in print, in black and white, for people to either read, not read, accept, not accept. But it's an act of democratic assertion. Right. I have the right to write. You have the right not to read. But I have the
or to criticize once somebody's book comes out.
Or to criticize. I mean, that is what a democracy is all about. Right. And what I have often been surprised about is the people who ask, why was this book written? Why do we even ask that question? Whatever the reasons, I think the scrutiny should be based on, does it have facts or not? Is it a set of truths, or is it a set of lies? And I think on that ground, I would defend every single word and statement in my book. Is the truth.
Sanjay, the last question that I wanted to ask is in some ways a foundational one, because the context of the book and a lot of what you've written about is that we are a democracy, and the Prime Minister is the head of an elected government. As a parliamentary democracy, in which political parties play a central role, what would you say to the argument that it is perfectly healthy for a political party to want to exert control over the functioning of a government which is there in power because the party wins an election, right? So in 2004, it is the Congress party under Sonia Gandhi which wins the election, hands down, and Dr. Manmohan Singh is chosen as Prime Minister. One can argue about the aesthetics of the way in which this control is exercised. But is there something fundamentally wrong with a political party, even on a day-to-day basis, insisting that its priorities and its agenda, which after all they say people voted for, should be reflected in what the government is doing? And the reason I'm asking this is that 10 years later, the signature accomplishments of UPA 1 are precisely, right to information, Narega. These are things which took birth within the much reviled National Advisory Council. And I know that there are many ideas which germinated in the NAC, which never saw the light of day because people in government opposed it and shot them down. So, this fundamental premise of your approach, which is that you have tension between party and prime minister, and that the prime minister is the one who's fighting the good fight against interference, how accurate is that?
You know, I in fact anticipated this, and I have in the book referred to a famous argument between Jawaharlal Nehru as Prime Minister of India and Acharya Kripalani as President of the Congress Party. Acharya Kripalani said exactly what you are saying. I am the President of the party. You have to tell me what you are doing in government, and I need to be kept informed. Jawaharlal Nehru said that I have been sworn as Prime Minister of the country. I have taken oath to the Constitution, and so have every member of the cabinet. If you want to know what the thinking of the government is before the government comes to Parliament, then come and join the government. Because as the President of the party, once the government has taken a view, of course it will have to first take the party's permission. There are party forums. There's a Congress Legislature Party. There's a parliamentary party. There are forums in which the government interacts with the party. And there are forums in which the government interacts with members of parliament. Nehru offered Kripalani minister without portfolio and said, you come into the government, then I'm willing to share with you what we are thinking. But as far as policy is concerned, I cannot share with you policy which is still in the making, because that comes under the Official Secrets Act. And you may be the Congress president, but and this matter was settled. What happens after that? What happens after that is that right through Indira Gandhi's tenure and Rajiv Gandhi's tenure and Narasimha Rao's tenure, the party president and the prime minister are the same person.
Right.
And therefore this question never came up. The question which Kripalani and Nehru debated came up under Sonia Gandhi and Manmohan Singh, because now for the first time you had a party president and a prime minister who are different. And the party president actually created an institutional mechanism to guide the government. And you can take two views. I mean, as you said.
No, but it didn't involve any breach of of the OSA.
No.
I mean, I'm saying that you can think of.
Didn't involve breach of, but the fact is that the institution of the National Advisory Council was a new institution that, in a sense, guided government policy. Now, you can defend it. I mean, there can be two views. Yeah. You can defend it. I think in many ways it diminished the prestige of the Prime Minister. That was my view. Now, you can say that, no, why do you say that? The Prime Minister's role is to listen to the party president, which is precisely the view that the General Secretary of the Communist Party would take vis-a-vis the head of government in the communist system. And this was the discussion even within the CPM when Jyoti Basu was Chief Minister and Pramod Dasgupta was General Secretary of the party in Bengal. Finally, after Pramod Dasgupta passed away, Jyoti Basu stopped reporting to the party. He ran virtually the party. Right. But these are questions that have been debated in the past.
Because there is no, I mean, NSC stands out in a way because in the Indian system, there is no ongoing manner in which the political party, quote unquote, gets to deliberate and in a way direct.
That's not true.
No, I'm saying that you have party conferences in the UK, for example, Labour Party conference, Conservative, which even no, but I'm saying not in the same way.
No, right? But why? The party could have had them here.
Right.
Nothing prevents you from having. There are consultative committees. Nothing prevents you from having political mechanisms. Right. NSC was not that way a political mechanism. It was a non-political mechanism interfering or interacting with the government.
Which made recommendations on an ongoing, some of which were accepted and stood the government in good stead, others which were rejected.
You could have put them all into the Planning Commission. I mean, this mechanism, after all, when Nehru created the Planning Commission, the same criticism was made by those who did not like the idea of the Planning Commission, because they said the Planning Commission is not a constitutional body. Right. Jawaharlal Nehru invented the Planning Commission. And the critics of Nehru said, but this is not a constitutional body. So in that sense, the NSC was also not a constitutional body. So you had these two non-constitutional bodies, advising government.
No, but I mean, the reason I'm saying is that in a way, whether we speak of the NSC or other forms of, party intervention, they at least sprang from a party which won an election, unlike, say, other forms of remote control.
Government springs from the party that wins the election.
This is true, but I'm saying party has the right to review the functioning of government on an ongoing basis, provided, as you say, the OSA is not breached.
No. First of all, every party has a right to do that, and there are party forums that should do that. Right. The government is a product of the party. Right. To think that the government is something independent or different from the party is wrong. Right. And I think the issue is not party versus government. The issue really is what is the nature of the relationship. Right. And in this case, the fact is that the chairperson of the UPA became the senior person. Right. And that is the criticism I make. Now, you can disagree with my view. Right. I have no problem with that. But my view was that in some ways that diminished the stature of Dr. Singh. Right.
Is it the aesthetics also that were a problem? I mean, the fact that there was a dynastic element here, which actually made this tension between party and government even more exaggerated. Do you think that was in the absence of mother-daughter, mother-son? If you had a kind of the normal tension between, for example, during Vajpayee's time, there, in fact, one could argue that the RSS was not even an elected body. It never presented itself publicly, yet was calling or trying to call the shots from behind the scenes. Here, at least, the mother and daughter and the mother and son in the party had an elected status.
Sure. I mean, look, that's what I'm saying. This whole issue was debated by Nehru and Kripalani. What should be the nature of the relationship between government and the party? And it keeps coming up. I'm sure it'll come up. And I'm pretty sure at the state level, look at the number of states in which governments are run by families or by individuals.
Telangana now, for example.
Everywhere. Everywhere. I mean, you take DMK, you take Jayalalitha, you take Mulayam Singh, you take now the way Mamta is running up government. Incidentally, this was an issue between Thackeray and Manohar Joshi when Manohar Joshi was chief minister. So it's a much wider problem in this country, and I think one needs to talk about it. You can take very different views. I have no problem with that.
Okay. Sanjay, thanks a lot. You've been very kind in answering our questions. Dr. Baru's book, The Accidental Prime Minister, deals with a whole range of issues with, I would say, some degree of nuance, particularly this question of the tension between a prime minister and the political party whose government he heads at the center. But if you're looking for nuance, if you're looking for discussion and balance, sadly, you won't find it in the film version of Dr. Baru's book, The Accidental Prime Minister. But the issues raised in the book certainly are worth debating, are worth discussing. Again, thank you very much for being with us, and thank you for watching this. Do tune in to thewire.in for other such interviews. Thank you.
To receive instant updates on all videos from The Wire, click the subscribe button and hit the bell icon. Pay to support independent journalism. Click the link in the description and choose the amount you want to pay.